All right, Steelers Nation. Let's jump into this because the coaching search is heating up and the road ahead is getting narrower by the day. Mike Tomlin used to say that the regular season feels like the road is getting narrower as it goes later and later, and right now, that same feeling applies to this head coach hunt. The Steelers have already interviewed 7 candidates, all virtually so far, and the list includes a mix of offensive and defensive minds. On the offensive side, there's Nate Schillens from the Rams, the passing game coordinator, and Clay Kubik, the offensive coordinator from the 49ers. The rest are defensive coordinators from around the league. Jiro Aya from the Panthers, Jesse Minter from the Chargers, Chris Shula from the Rams, Anthony Weaver from the Dolphins, and Jeff Hafley from the Packers. But Hafley is no longer in the mix because he just became the Dolphins' head coach, which changes the equation. So where does that leave the Steelers? Well, officially, there are 8 candidates remaining. That's 7 virtual interviews minus Hafley, plus Brian Flores, who is expected to have his first in-person interview this week. There's been some confusion about whether Flores had already interviewed, but the latest is that this will be his first meeting with the team. The other person getting an in-person interview is Mike McCarthy, and he's expected to be on the South Side soon. The only other name from the earlier list that's confirmed for an in-person meeting is Anthony Weaver, the Dolphins' defensive coordinator. So the Steelers are clearly narrowing things down, but they are still taking the time to do it right. One of the most interesting parts of this process is how much overlap there has been across the league. Several teams have been interviewing the same candidates, and that has created a domino effect, for teams have already filled their head coaching vacancies. John Harbaugh to the Giants, Kevin Stefanski to the Falcons, Jeff Hafley to the Dolphins, and Robert Saleh to the Titans. That leaves 6 teams still searching, which is pretty remarkable considering that at the peak there were 10 teams still looking. The remaining teams include the Ravens and Browns within the division, the Raiders, the Cardinals, and now the Bills after they parted ways with Sean McDermott. It's a crowded market, and the Steelers are trying to make the right move without rushing. Now, the big question everyone wants answered is who is the favorite, who will be the biggest surprise, and who will make the biggest splash. The truth is, nobody can say for sure right now, not even the people making the decision. Art Rooney and Omar Khan have sat down face-to-face with the candidates, but there are a few things about the process that I genuinely like so far. First, the Steelers appear to be open-minded. There's enough variety in the candidate pool that it doesn't feel like they are locked into one specific profile. That's a good sign because it means they're not just going through the motions. They're actively looking for the right fit. Rooney has said before that the Steelers found Tomlin in a similar way. They didn't expect him to get the job, but the more they talked, the more they liked him. It's an approach that can work again. I also like that offensive candidates are included on the list. Now, that doesn't mean I'm insisting they must hire an offensive coach. If they end up choosing a defensive guy, I'm not going to lose my mind, but I do think the organization could use some shakeup, especially on offense. The Steelers have been known for defensive strength for years, and in the year 2026, it would be refreshing to see them focus more on offensive identity and playmaking. I also like that they aren't limiting themselves by age. The candidates range from the mid-30s to the early 60s, which shows they're willing to consider both experience and youth. That's important because it means they're evaluating leadership and fit rather than just checking a box. Another thing that stands out is how Rooney answered the question about what he's looking for in a head coach. He said one word: leadership. He didn't give some flashy answer to excite fans or media. He didn't talk about offense or defense, or what style of play he wanted. He simply said leadership. Someone who can run the football side of the organization. If you look at the candidates, most of them have strong leadership backgrounds, and that's reassuring. Chris Shula, in particular, stands out as someone who seems to embody that kind of presence, but he's not the only one. The group is full of capable leaders, and that should give Steelers fans some confidence. Now here's another key part of this whole search. The Steelers are clearly waiting on the Rams. Right now, there are 4 teams left in the NFL playoffs, and those teams will be playing in the conference championships this weekend. The Rams are the only team in that group, with candidates still in the Steelers' mix, namely Nate Schillens and Chris Shula. If the Rams beat the Seahawks, which would be a bit of an upset in my opinion, those 2 candidates could still have their in-person interviews between the conference championships and the Super Bowl, because there's an extra week in the schedule. That means the Steelers don't have to rush. They can use this week to interview other candidates in person, but they can also wait for the Rams situation to resolve. It's a smart strategy, and I hope they stick with it. There's something about Shillings and Shula that makes them feel like the class of this group. I've done more research on them than on some of the other candidates, and they both have a compelling blend of leadership, offensive innovation, and the ability to connect with players. That doesn't mean they are the only options, but they are the ones that stand out most to me right now. It's still early, and another few days of interviews won't hurt anyone. In fact, taking the time to fully evaluate each candidate is exactly what the Steelers should be doing, because the next head coach is going to be a major decision for the future of the franchise. Now let's pivot to a question from the Daily Shot segment, because it's one that I've seen a lot of people asking. The question is whether the Steelers' head coaching position is a lifetime appointment by design, or if Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and Mike Tomlin earned their long leashes by winning earlier in their careers. The answer is different for each coach, and that's important to understand. Noll was 37 when he was hired, and he stayed with the team for 23 seasons. That's an incredibly long tenure. But he also came into a franchise that was struggling. At that time, it would have been unreasonable to assume that he was going to be a lifetime coach. He earned his longevity through sustained success and by building a winning culture. Bill Cowher's situation was different. He came in after Noll, and he immediately made an impact. People didn't expect him to last as long as he did, but he forged his own identity quickly. He had that classic Pittsburgh toughness, and he brought a different style than his predecessor. Over time, the conversation around Cowher wasn't about how long he was coaching, but about how close he kept getting to the Super Bowl. People wanted him to keep getting those opportunities because he kept giving the team a chance to compete at the highest level. Eventually, he won a Super Bowl in 2005 and then stepped down after 15 seasons. He was only 49 at the time, and like Noll, he never coached again. And then Mike Tomlin arrived, and he brought a new energy and a new level of consistency. Even early in his tenure, people were talking about how long he had been with the team, because the Steelers have had just 3 head coaches since 1969. The idea that this position is a lifetime appointment isn't something that was designed from the start. It's more a result of the organization's willingness to stick with coaches who have proven themselves, and the fact that each of those coaches built a culture of winning and leadership. Rooney has said that Tomlin walked into the room and blew them away, and that's the kind of impression that can change a franchise. So what does all this mean for the next head coach? When the Steelers first released their list of candidates, it looked like most of them were under their mid-40s. That made people wonder if the team was prioritizing youth. Then Mike McCarthy appeared on the list, and suddenly the age conversation changed. Is McCarthy there out of respect, or is he a legitimate contender? That's the kind of question that makes this process so intriguing. The truth is, I don't think we're going to know for sure until the interviews are complete and the Steelers have had a chance to sit down with these candidates in person. At the end of the day, I believe this search won't take an extremely long time. It's more about waiting out the Rams and making sure the right candidate is chosen. The Steelers have assembled a strong group of candidates, and it's clear they're taking the process seriously. Now we just have to see how it plays out over the remainder of the month, because the decision will shape the next era of Steelers football. Now, let's keep going and dig deeper into what this coaching search could mean for the Steelers' future. The biggest thing to understand is that the Steelers are not just hiring a head coach. They are defining the identity of the franchise for the next decade. When you look at the way the organization has historically operated, they have always valued stability, discipline, and a certain type of leadership that can handle the unique pressures of Pittsburgh. That is why the head coaching role here has become almost legendary. It is not just a job. It is a calling, and that is exactly why the search has to be methodical, and why it makes sense that Rooney and Khan are not rushing into a decision just because the calendar is moving. One of the most intriguing aspects of the current candidate pool is the balance between offensive creativity and defensive structure. The Steelers have long been known for defense-first football, but the league is evolving and offenses are becoming more dynamic every year. If the Steelers are going to remain competitive in 2026 and beyond, they need to adapt to modern offensive trends while maintaining their traditional strengths. That is why it is encouraging to see offensive minds like Nate Shillings and Clay Kubik in the mix. They bring fresh ideas, and they represent a possible shift toward a more aggressive, explosive offense, but at the same time, The defensive candidates bring a level of toughness and discipline that is still crucial to Steelers football. It's a rare opportunity to find a coach who can blend both philosophies. Now, I want to address something that a lot of fans are worried about: the idea of change. Change can be scary, especially in a city like Pittsburgh, where football is not just a sport, it is part of the culture. Fans have grown used to the Tomlin era and the stability it brought. But there comes a time when every era ends. And the question is how the next era begins. The Steelers have a chance to build something new. And that requires a coach who can bring a fresh voice, while still respecting the tradition of the organization. That is not an easy balance to strike, but it is possible. The key is finding someone who can command respect, develop talent, and create a culture that players want to be a part of. Another thing to consider is the quarterback situation. The Steelers have always had a special relationship with their quarterbacks, and the next head coach will have to manage that dynamic carefully. The team is entering a period where the quarterback position could be in transition, and the coach will need to have a vision for how to develop the offense and maximize the talent on the roster. That is one reason why the offensive candidates are so interesting. They may be better positioned to build a quarterback-friendly system and help the team evolve offensively, but again, that does not mean a defensive coach cannot do the same. A great leader can bring in the right staff and build a system that fits the players. The question of leadership is also crucial, because the Steelers have a history of head coaches who were not just strategists, but motivators. Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and Mike Tomlin were all leaders who could inspire their teams and get the most out of their players. That is why Rooney's focus on leadership is so important. The next head coach has to be someone who can stand in front of the locker room and command attention. They have to be someone who can handle the media, manage the pressure, and keep the team focused through the highs and lows of the season. Pittsburgh fans are demanding, and the coach will need to be able to handle that. Now, let's talk about the lifetime appointment myth. The Steelers are often associated with long-tenured head coaches, but that does not mean the position is designed to be a permanent one. Noll, Cowher, and Tomlin all earned their long runs through performance and success. Noll came in when the franchise was struggling, and he built it into a powerhouse. Cowher came in and quickly established his identity and gave the Steelers consistent championship-level opportunities. Tomlin brought a new era of consistency and success. Each of them proved themselves, and the organization rewarded that success with stability. That is not a guarantee for any coach, but it does show that the Steelers are willing to stick with a coach who delivers results and leadership. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. Whispers around the league suggest that a major quarterback domino may be about to fall, and the center of the noise is Pittsburgh, according to sources familiar with the conversations. The Steelers have received a clear yes from Russell Wilson, opening the door for a blockbuster trade framework with Denver that is now being discussed with increasing seriousness. While nothing has been formally announced, the confidence inside league circles is that this is more than casual dialogue, and far beyond early feelers. The appeal is obvious on both sides. Pittsburgh has been searching for stability and authority at the most important position on the field, and Wilson's resume still carries weight in locker rooms across the NFL. Team insiders believe the Steelers see him not as a long-term rebuild piece, but as an immediate culture driver capable of elevating a roster that feels closer to contention than its recent quarterback play has indicated. Wilson, for his part, is said to be intrigued by the organization's defensive identity, its tradition of continuity, and the opportunity to reset his narrative in a demanding but familiar football environment. From Denver's perspective, the talks reflect a growing acceptance that a new chapter may be necessary. The Broncos are widely believed to be willing to absorb complexity in order to gain flexibility, and that is where the rumor gains another layer. Along with Wilson, a veteran player could be included in the package, someone whose experience might help balance contracts or provide Pittsburgh with immediate depth. The identity of that veteran remains the subject of debate, with executives privately floating multiple names, none yet confirmed, around the league. Rival front offices are watching closely. Some see this as a calculated gamble by Pittsburgh, betting that Wilson still has high-level football left in him if placed in the right structure. Others view it as a pragmatic move by Denver to accelerate a broader reset. Either way, The conversations have reached a point where silence feels louder than denial. If this deal materializes as expected, it could reshape expectations, redefine careers, and set off a chain reaction well beyond these two franchises. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.